Hey everybody, Qroo here. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to form the past participle in Spanish from verbs you already know. And then I'm also going to show you different ways to use the past participle to really give your Spanish a boost. Now, don't let the grammatical terms scare you. I know there's some folks out there and they're like, I have no idea what a past participle is, Paul. And you're not alone. I think that if I went out and asked like 10 adults right now, just randomly on the street, I don't know, maybe 2 would know? Anyway, I think examples work. You do know what past participles are. You use them in your English. And here are examples. I have worked. Worked is a past participle. I have eaten. Eaten is a past participle. Well, I'm going to show you how to form words like that in Spanish. And this is really going to give your Spanish a boost, especially in the terms of vocabulary. All right. Now, let's talk about past participles. There are regular verbs that follow the pattern I'm about to show you. And then there's irregular verbs that you have to learn individually. And if you've been learning conjugation, you're already used to this, right? We have that, cast of characters over there that don't conjugate like everybody else does. A lot of those words are going to look similar today, okay? Another thing I'm going to be covering in this video is there are certain verbs in Spanish that have 2 different past participles, but they're not always used in the same way. See, when I started this video, this was supposed to be simple, and I started going down rabbit holes, and well, here we are. So let's see how this thing turns out. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start with just regular verbs, right? And how to convert those into the past participle. We tend to break these up into AR verbs and ER and IR, and we're doing the same thing here, so I'll start with AR verbs. And when I say AR verbs, I'm talking about verbs that end in AR, like hablar, to speak. Well, to convert these verbs into the past participles, very simple. Drop the AR and add ADO, ado. So hablar, to speak, would become hablado, which means spoken. Jugar, to play, would be jugado, played. You go ahead and try one. Here's a very common Spanish verb. Trabajar, to work. Trabajado. It's not too hard, right? Now let's talk about ER and IR verbs. We're going to drop our ending and we're going to put IDO, ido. So AR is ado, and this is ido. Comer, to eat. Go ahead and do it. I bet you can do it. Comido. All right, let's go ahead and do an IR verb. A very common one is to live, vivir. Bebido. You got this. Now that you know how to form the past participle from regular verbs, let's go ahead and look at some different ways that you actually use the past participle in Spanish. And you might be going, what about all these irregular verbs? I'm going to get to those. Let's talk about some different ways to use them, so they're just random words. And that way you'll understand the examples as we go through it. All right, there's some logic to my madness. Now, the number one way you're going to see past participles used is with the verb haber to form the perfect tenses. And I know they're like, there's more grammatical terms, Paul. I know, they're going to be all through this thing. Now, haber means to have. And some people may be like, okay, I thought tener was to have. Tener is to have, but it's like to have something. Like, I have this coffee cup. Tengo esta taza de café. Haber is a helping verb that means to have. And the perfect tenses is like when we say, I have spoken with Maria. Have spoken, that haber is the have part. He hablado con Maria. I have spoken with Maria. So we're taking that, conjugating the verb haber, and we're just popping in our past participle. And I have an entire video about haber that goes into a lot of detail, with the perfect tenses and everything. You can watch that one separately. I'm just going to touch on it here. What's really important here is the only thing that's going to change is that verb haber in terms of conjugation. We're not going to be changing the past participle. It doesn't matter who the subject is. That's important because you're going to see a little change as we move through these. So I have spoken, he hablado. You have spoken, has hablado. We have spoken, hemos hablado. See, hablado does not change. Now, another way that you'll be using the past participles a lot is with the verb ser, to be, to form the passive voice. And this is a construction that's very similar to English in structure. So, English speakers, we get this one pretty quickly. The building was constructed in 1891. El edificio fue construido, and construido is our past participle. It's coming from the verb construir. En 1891. Now, as you can see from the little example here, this is in the preterite tense. I'm talking about ser. And this is usually how you're going to see it. You're going to see ser in the preterite tense plus the past participle. Now, in this sentence, we're not saying, it was constructed by someone. In English, we could say that, the city was constructed in 1891 by a certain person. You can do that in Spanish. The by part will be the word por, P-O-R. El edificio fue construido por Miguel Sánchez. The building was constructed by Miguel Sánchez. Now there's one thing that's very, very important about this, and that is that the past participle has to agree in number and gender with the noun. That's very different than when we're talking about the perfect tenses with haber, right? Here we have to pay attention to that. Now in our example, our noun, el edificio, the building, is a singular masculine noun, and that's why it was construido. But take a look at this sentence. If we want to translate, the documents were signed by the director. How are we going to do that? Well, let's break it down. So the documents, los documentos. It is a masculine plural noun. So we've got to pay attention to our verb, right? What's our verb going to be? Our conjugation. Fueron, because it's plural. And we're going to say signed. And the verb for to sign is firmar. So we have to turn that into the past participle and pay attention to number and gender. And what do we get? Firmados, firmados. And by the director, por el director. Put it all together. Los documentos fueron firmados por el director or la directora if it's a female. Now let's just do just a feminine singular one just to see real quick. The city was founded in 1521. And that's probably a verb you don't use a lot, to found a city. That's going to be fundar, fundar. If you want to try that real quick. The city was founded in 1521. Ready? La ciudad fue fundada en 1521. Now, if you had trouble with the dates, that just takes time getting your numbers down. The important thing is if you got fue fundada, it has to agree. Now, we could play with this construction all day, but I don't want the whole video to turn into it. So let's go back to where we're going to be using our past participles. And another way is we're going to be creating adjectives from them. And this is where it's going to give your Spanish such a massive boost. Now, remember, when we're dealing with adjectives, they're going to agree in number and gender with, with the noun. So just keep that in mind. So far we've seen that with haber, it does not change. But with ser, it does. And we're using them as adjectives here. It's going to change, okay? And agree in number and gender. We've got this. You got this. So let's look at some examples here. The decorated rooms look very pretty. Las habitaciones decoradas. Decoradas is our past participle. Comes from the verb decorar, to decorate. All right? The rest of the sentence, se ven muy bonitas. A lot of agreement in there. We have a plural feminine noun, las habitaciones, and they're decorated. So that's an adjective describing it, right? Decoradas. And how do they look? Bonitas. Everything agrees in there. Now, one of the ways that I like to teach this is kind of linking it back to ser. So here we have las habitaciones decoradas, the decorated rooms. But could you say the rooms were decorated by Miguel? Try that. Las habitaciones fueron decoradas por Miguel. So now that you can create past participles, you're going to have a lot more adjectives to work with, and it's going to spice up your Spanish. For example, the tired children went to bed. Instead of just saying the children went to bed, I can say the tired children. Los niños cansados se acostaron, or se fueron a dormir. There's a couple different ways. So let's focus on los niños cansados, and the verb was cansar, to tire. A very common verb in Spanish that's very useful is apagar, apagar, which means to turn off. So now you can say things like, the light is turned off. La luz está apagada. It has to be apagada because it's la luz. All right, I'm going to speed this up a little bit and go through the examples just a little bit faster so, we can get to those irregulars and this video is not like 3 hours long. The food prepared by my aunt smells delicious. See, the English tells us we're going to be using the past participle in Spanish. La comida preparada por mi tía huele deliciosa. The ironed and folded clothes are on your bed. And see, we're using a couple past participles here. La ropa planchada, planchar is to iron. La ropa planchada, the ironed clothes, y doblada, and folded, está sobre tu cama, are on your bed. And sobre is used a lot for on top of, when it's something you would normally put things on top of, like, you know, a bed or a table. You'll see sobre. Mi café está sobre la mesa. It's on top of the table. But I could say en la mesa. All right, now it's time to move on to the irregular past participles. Spanish has plenty of irregulars, and you're going to need to memorize them individually. Here are some of the most common ones, and I put them in order of frequency and usefulness, and threw in some examples as well. Number one on our list is hacer, to make or to do. Hecho. Ya está hecho. It's already done. That's a pretty useful little saying there. Next one is poner. It's puesto. La mesa está puesta para la cena. The table is set for dinner. And if you don't know that expression, poner la mesa is to set the table. So now we're using it with our past participle, and we're saying the table is set. La mesa está puesta. Now you'll be using past participles with other verbs as well that I haven't gotten into. I'm going to give you an example. A pretty common one with puesto is to say that somebody's wearing something. And a lot of times that's going to be done with the verb llevar, which means to carry. So it's like they carry it put. And that doesn't match English too closely. Here's a good example. Juan is wearing a blue coat. Juan lleva puesto un abrigo azul. Literally it's saying like Juan carries put a blue coat. But the whole point here is I'm just showing you that there's that past participle again. So this is really, really going to boost your Spanish. Next one, decir, to say, becomes dicho. Ya lo he dicho. I have already said it. Escribir, to write, escrito. Ella ha escrito una carta. She has written a letter. And see, that's in the perfect tense, so we're not changing escrito. It's always going to be singular masculine. Abrir, to open, abierto. La puerta está abierta. The door is open. Ver, to see, visto. He visto esa película. I have seen that movie. Romper, to break, roto. El vaso está roto. The glass is broken. Volver, to return, is vuelto, vuelto. Ella ha vuelto a casa. She has returned home. This next one's going to be real easy after seeing that last one. Devolver, to return, and that's to return like an item, like to return a book to the library, etc. Devuelto. Ya he devuelto el libro. I have returned the book. Cubrir, to cover, cubierto. La mesa está cubierta de papeles. The table is covered with papers. One thing I want to point out there is we're using the preposition de with cubierto to say it's covered with something. That's very common. Descubrir, to discover, descubierto. Ellos han descubierto un nuevo café en la ciudad. They have discovered a new cafe in the city. Describir, to describe, descrito. El lugar descrito en el informe está cerca. The place described in the report is nearby. Satisfacer is to satisfy, and this is satisfecho. And you'll notice it's very close to hacer. See the facer, hacer, and it's going to conjugate very similar, if that helps you. Estoy satisfecho con la comida. I'm satisfied with the food. Now I'm going to be covering some verbs that actually have two past participles. All right. Here's an example. Freír is to fry, like to fry food. And we have freído and frito. Which one do we use? Well, the freído one, the longer one, is the one that we would typically use when connected to another verb, like haber or ser, something like that. When you have those verb combos, that's generally what you're going to use. He freído los huevos. I have fried the eggs. But if you want to say the fried eggs are on the table and you're using it as an adjective, then that other version is going to be the common one there. Los huevos fritos están en la mesa, or sobre la mesa. Another common verb on this list is proveer. Proveer, and it means to provide. So we have proveído and provisto. And proveído is the one we're going to be using with haber and ser most often. And I say most often because there's people sometimes that deviate from that, just most often. La empresa ha proveído materiales a los empleados. The company has provided materials to the employees. Los libros provistos por la escuela son gratuitos. The books provided by the school are free. Another one on the list is bendecir, which means to bless. So we have bendecido and bendito. El sacerdote ha bendecido la iglesia. The priest has blessed the church. La iglesia bendita, the blessed church. See, bendita is better for an adjective. Well, there you have it. That is the end of the video. I know this one ran a little long, but I think it's a pretty detailed look at past participles, how to form them, how you can use them, work them into your Spanish. If you liked the video, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up. And until next time, hasta luego.